Okay, so now we're going to continue to try and balance these three main layers that make up our main mountain. We're going to darken the shadow side a little bit just to bring it forward, punch it out a little bit more, and then we're going to warm up and and adjust our highlight side a little bit. Again, we're just using curves for all of this. Now we're going to go into another chunk of reference and block in the foreground island on the right, doing the same duplication of a channel, make it high contrast. And here we're just using lasso just to garbage out some of the beach. Make a nice inverse selection, and then copy and paste that into a new layer. And so this will serve as the beach for our foreground island. And notice I am trying to preserve some of the water just because it is natural, it is part of the reference, and it'll make a nice blend into whatever we do for the rest of the water. Using the defringe tool. And I'm just doing a very soft split in there, and it was very bright, so I brought it down a little bit in curves. Now I'm going back to that beach layer that I'd started painting, and I'm just going to be blocking in this beach, just to kind of show how all this land connects. Using a very small round brush, and again just using the shift key to make these lines nice and straight. Adding bits of shadow coming down from the land. And I'm clicking on the preserve transparency option so that whenever I paint, we'll only paint inside of that layer. That's so I can use a nice big soft round brush to paint in a very skinny little layer. So I turn that off, and now I'm blocking in some more water. Some more of the brighter cyan water, so that we can show that it is shallower there, extending off the point of the beach. I'm going to go and just shape that a little bit into more of a natural sort of point that you would expect to see. And eventually we'll go in and do all sorts of little fine little detailing in there. But right now we're just erasing some of the slop of some of these reference photos. Going with a bit smaller and just trying to show how this beach wraps around to this closer spit of land. So that would be almost like a lagoon, and it would be quite shallow there. So we're going to keep that a brighter cyan. So now we're going back and erasing some of our original island scribble, and just so we can use our newly created photographic land. We're just going to clean up the bottom of this hill so that so you can definitely see where it hits the water. Just made that a nice straight edge. We're going to race into it and just kind of show how it recedes back into space. Okay, so now we're going back into our beach paint layer, and you notice how I called up a little box that showed the layer names. Now the way you do that, it's actually really great. It's Control Command and then click on a specific spot, and it'll tell you exactly what layers are under that point. It's a great tool for finding layers when you have a lot. Now what I've done here, I'm just blocking in some of the beach, showing how the beach undulates as it goes away from us, and also just starting to scribble in a little bit of the vegetation. Now we're just sort of erasing some of our slop, just trying to clean up the water just a little bit. Now going back to our right island here, where the brights were extremely bright, and so we're just going to just correct it just a little bit. Going to warm it up. Notice we're going into the blue channel, bringing down the white point on the blue, which will add yellow to the highlights. So here we're just dropping our white point. And once again, curves are just a very, very powerful, very effective tool for doing this type of color correction. Doing a little bit of renaming there. Adding a layer mask. And taking a big soft brush, just scribbling into some of that water, just so that it fades off pretty nicely. We still have a bit of color correction to do on that water, but it'll help it sit in there. So I'm back into my water layer, and I just sampled off some of that blue color just to unify it a little bit. and on our gone to my island scribble layer, and I'm just going to be erasing some of what I have there, just to clean it up, just so I know what I'm working with. It's always a good idea to clean up as you go, but it's really easy to get bogged down with a lot of layers. So we're adding darker patches of water to show variations in depth. Some lighter stuff along the beach. See, we're going quite a bright cyan color. It's one of the most saturated colors in this painting. But that's fine for us, because when you look at photos of tropical areas such as this, the blue is very, very saturated. In fact, oftentimes much brighter and bluer than this. So we're creating a new layer as a clipping mask that we're going to use to shadow some of this little island right here. And we're also killing a lot of the contrast, just because it was just a little too contrasty for that distance. And we're using Quick Mask to paint in a selection for the highlight side. And we're going to lift that a little bit, just to show that there is a shadow falling across this island. I think it's starting to work a lot better for us. Now we're doing a big motion blur on the water, just because I done a lot of different paint strokes, and so we're just doing a nice horizontal motion blur of quite a large distance, just to kind of unify the water a little bit. We still have a lot of painting to. We just kind of want to simplify what we have so far. So going back into our paint layer, we're just going to work on some of the integration with the beach into the mountain and cliffside. So you find little areas where the walls go, where the walls of the cliff go in, and you try and suggest sand being windswept up into it. Back to our water layer, and we're creating a new layer, which we're going to start blocking in some of our reflections. Now we're just going to keep these very simple, and just kind of basically add a darker tone, which is and then basically paint in a mirror of the land above it. We're going to be putting some water texture on top of this, so we aren't concerned with it being incredibly accurate. It's just a suggestion. Want it to fade out as it gets closer towards us, where more of the water ripples will have an effect on it. So you can see here, I am paying a bit of attention to the light and dark of the mountain that I am reflecting, but I am keeping it very simple, just using a big soft brush. Especially on an ocean, you hardly ever get perfect reflections. So we're pretending this is a fairly calm day. Back to our beach paint layer. Using a very small round brush. Going into an even bit of a brighter cyan, just to show that shallow area continuing. Also helps break up that reflection. Now we're going into this fore right island, and just clean up some of the edges. Still have some boat and just a lot of little slop. Just making that beach read pretty well. Going back to our reflection layer. Add a layer mask to it, and what we're doing, we're using a very small brush to paint into the layer mask to hide some of that reflection, just to introduce a bit of water surface ripples and details, so it's not such a mirror, so that there are areas where the reflection does not show up. Back to our water layer. Again, you see I use that layer selection shortcut all the time. Again, it's Control-Command-Click on a Mac. Go back in, just cleaning up some of my beach, some of my water. Going back to our original island scribble, trying to erase some of that slop. I'm just trying to figure out where that dark patch is coming from, and that's why you see me clicking on a lot of different layers, just trying to figure out, all right, where is this thing coming from, so I know which layer to erase, so I can get a nice clean area to work with right there. Which is pretty much what I've just done. So back into our beach paint layer. I'm just continuing to put in this beach. And as I said, it's going to be a very shallow area in there, so we're going to keep that probably pretty bright. You notice I'm putting a darker area in the middle, which is where it would be deeper. Now I'm adding a bit more of this reflection of our big main mountain. And it really helps just to sell the illusion a little bit. We're going to be adding, as I said, we're going to be adding quite a lot of texture on top of this, but as long as the hint is there, it's really going to be helpful. So now I'm just going to do a bit of a motion blur on the scribbles that I've done just to make sure it all reflects downward. It was, since I just blocked it in with rough scribbles, it kind of needed that. So now we're opening up this other photo, and here you can see that bright blue water I was talking about. And we're just going to grab we're just going to do our same little trick here. Just finding a high contrast channel. I'm going to grab this island, copy and paste it. Right in, we're going to create this little spit of land that comes off of the main island. So this is actually quite a nice little piece of reference because it's a nice long beach and actually comes to point on both sides, which is exactly what we're looking for. And you notice me selecting little bits of it and then distorting it. What I'm trying to do is create a subtle little bit of a curve just to get a bit more perspective to it, so that we're creating a very shallow ellipse to it. So you can see I'm just selecting different halves and just skewing them up or down just to create a nice gradual curve to this. Now I just need some color correction. The whites of the sand were really blasting out, so I'm just bringing those down. Adding a layer mask so I can do a nice blend into that water. Just using a nice soft brush, just a big round. Now I'm going into a brush with a bit more texture, turning on the scattering and the shape dynamics, so that I can carve out some of these palm trees. It was a bit overgrown. I was more concerned about the beach than I was about the large island. So we're going to quickly paint into the layer mask just to take away a lot of that part of that island. We're going to leave a little chunk off to the right just because it's nice to have a little bit of interest and not keep it so perfect and regular. But we definitely are going to take down most of that island. So we're adding a new layer and we're grouping it with that island layer. And we're taking a soft brush with the dark color, just adding some cast shadow from where that building's going to go. And again, we like to do this on as many different layers as possible just so that we can have freedom to adjust it later. So now we're grabbing a chunk which is going to be part of our foreground. Duplicate the channel with highest contrast, make it black and white, make a selection, and then copy and paste the chunk that you want. So we're pasting that on top of our foreground. This is going to serve as part of the basis for it. And we're just trying to position it in there. We're only going to use a part of this. We're being kind of liberal with squashing and stretching this thing. There isn't a lot of identifiable shapes, so we can get away with this. Adding a layer mask. And just very quickly hacking out some of that excess cliff. So I think this little piece is going to work quite nicely. So we're just painting and erasing into layer mask to reveal and take away chunks of this layer. So we're using that sort of textury little brush just to give a bit of an organic edge. And what I've done, I've duplicated this layer and I moved it up, and I'm just trying to fill in the rest of that little bit of hole up in the top left. So you can see I have a lot of slop, but we'll just we'll matte that out very quickly. So now we have a nice piece of photo that is pretty much covering the whole area we need, and then we'll go in and do a lot of painting to make it all sit in there nicely. So just kind of trying to follow the contours of what's there, and it's very important when you are erasing into these photos to try and find natural lines and natural breaks of where to break these things up, because a lot of people just hack a line right to the middle of it, and if it doesn't make sense with the contours of what's there, then it's really not going to look good. You really need to follow the natural contours, whether it be a rock or a bush, kind of find a natural split line. So now we're just erasing out some of that road that was in there. And we're also erasing out our foreground scribble just so that we can see exactly what we're dealing with on this foreground layer. Just using the lasso tool just to quickly garbage out a lot of the slop. And actually, I find that the lasso tool is actually quite useful for creating these organic style of edges, just because you can work very quickly with it. Just sort of a jittery hand. I use it a lot for doing this type of shrubbery and vegetation. And it still needs some paint on top of it, but it's a very nice sort of first start. The other brush I was using was a bit too dotty, and so I think this has a bit more of a random nature to it. And so typically what I do is then go in and blur that. Now here's another photo that I took. This is actually from Fiji with some of the others, and it's actually my girlfriend Bethany in the photo, but we're going to use it for the foreground beach. And you notice I'm squashing this thing pretty heavily, mainly just to make it fit with our perspective. I want a much flatter thing. And it also works because we have some of the water in there and the beach. So again, we just added a layer mask, and we're just garbaging out the area we don't want. So we're going to do a nice soft split to try and retain a lot of this water. Now, if this were a real matte painting for film, we would probably be handling this water a bit differently, because normally we would have to have photographic plates of moving footage in order to do this properly. So we would probably be given certain plates of beaches with water. But since this is just a still, we're approaching this a little bit differently. So we've gone in and using a gradient quick mask into curves, and so we're just brightening up some of the beach just so it matches the tone of our sketch and of our other beaches. It's making it nice and warm, fairly bright, but definitely not blown out. Toggling on the preview, it's a good way to check what you have done so far. So I think we're pretty happy with that. So now we're using the actually we're going to use a history eraser to paint back into the area we don't want. You can see I set my history eraser in the history palette there. I set where I want to erase to. So we're just erasing out just a little bit of the areas. Erasing back to that history state. So now I'm adding a quick mask on the right side in that area of beach and water that is a bit brighter than we want it, because this chunk of beach is actually lit from the opposite side, and so we're trying to correct that lighting. And I clicked off the layer mask so I could see the whole area, even though I'm not going to be using all of it. It'll be nice to blend it in. So now that we have selected that area, we're going to darken it down so that it tries to match the rest of our water. We're using curves to do this. You know, it was really kind of blown out and had a lot of reflection in it, so we're going to try and darken it down, bring out some of that detail, and make it a bit more cyan blue. See, I'm just trying to raise the darks and take down the highlights, just so it doesn't get overly contrasty when I bring it down. So now I'm going back to the history eraser again. Just touching up a little bit of the water's edge, where I do want to keep some lightness. Going up into hue saturation. I just want to probably saturate just a bit, just to get some of that nice color in there. Okay, so I'm getting a little more happy with that. So we're going to reapply our layer mask, and then so now we have a much nicer blend. We're going to continue to paint with our layer mask, big soft brush, or paint it with a quick mask. You can just use Q to pull that up, or there's a toggle in the tools palette. And so here's where I want to add a bit more of that brighter cyan blue as we get closer to the beach. Doing that by adding a bit of green and a bit of blue. It's subtle, but it really does help sell the illusion of depth. I think we like where that's going. Now we've just created a new adjustment layer. And we're using curves, so right now we're just trying to create a nice shadow tone. Even though it's affecting the whole image, we will then we'll adjust that. So what I've done, I've inversed our layer mask on that curves adjustment layer. So now we are erasing into that layer mask to reveal the curves. So what we're doing is erasing to create a shadow. And so we are creating the cast shadow from the big foreground left cliff. So now we have this cast shadow, which is affecting both the sand and the water. And it's nice to do this on a separate layer so that we can then have the freedom to adjust it later. Okay, so we're going back to our adjustment layer, and we're going to use the gradient to reveal more of the background, and then we're going to call up the fade function just to fade it back a little bit, because as we get further from that foreground cliff, the beach and the water are going to be picking up a lot more ambient light. And so now we're doing another quick mask gradient to affect that beach layer, just so that the core shadow, meaning the area closest to what was casting on it, does get darker. So now we've gone to another chunk of land. Just did a quick little lasso to select this, and I just thought this would be a nice transitional element from the cliff to the beach. That's some nice little land masses. So just using the layer mask just to go in and kind of create a nice little blend. Just using curves to do some adjustments to it. Take down the saturation. Here's another element that I liked. We're just going to move kind of quickly through a lot of this just because it is a lot of the same things over and over again. But this piece is a very valuable piece because it has a lot of the sand. And so then we can use this as a nice transitional element. Using the free transform tool, you use Command T to pull that up, and using a lot of the distort tools. So yeah, here we have it already color corrected and blended in. We're going to add a rock, and using the same tools to extract these elements using the copy of the channel. So here it is. We're going to try and stick this rock in here, but we don't want it to dominate the composition. We want to keep it fairly small. We're going to test it out on the right side. We may put a rock there later, but we're going to keep this very small. We're going to squash it down a little bit just to add a bit of interest, so it's not just land going straight to sand. So there is a variation of texture. And we were going into the layer mask there to block out some of that excess. So we're calling up curves to correct this down a little bit, adding a bit of warmth and darkening it. You know, because a lot of that sand will be casting reflected light up into that rock, so it is going to be a bit warmer. And we just added a new paint layer, and we're just going to paint in this integration. And so we're going to paint in some of the sand and how it goes up into these bushes and then up into the cliff. So you can see we're really starting to get in here, just using a normal round brush, just using sampling off of the painting to get a lot of different colors. We're adding in a lot of sort of windswept sand, so it gets swept up into the rock. This type of integration really helps sell that the rock is sitting there. Going back to that chalky brush, clicking on a lot of the shape dynamics and color dynamics. So now we're just blocking in some more of this greenery and sand, just to create a more believable integration between these objects. So we're just keying off of our reference layers, just using a lot of the same colors, and then with this dynamics we can quickly mimic the same type of texture. So we're again following the same contours of the rock with the green this time instead of the sand, taking off those dynamics. And now we're just going back in with our normal brush, and just showing how sand is integrating in here, adding a bit of a shadow onto that sand. Just and remember, this is all in shadows. So this is gonna be very indirect. So here are some of our palm trees. Now this palm tree I had already previously extracted, but it was extracted using the same elements or the same methods as we showed before. So we're gonna place this palm tree. Now this palm tree, you can see it's very lit, harsh sunlight, but we're gonna take care of that. But first things first, we're gonna try and position it properly. And using our sketch as a guide, we're gonna use that as a starting point. Now we can clear out our sketch, and now we're just dealing with our photographic palm tree. Now then we're gonna use curves to darken it down, but the main thing we're gonna use is this color overlay. just as we used on the distant stuff. But because it's foreground, it's a nice dark silhouette. We're just going to use that. So we're doing a nice dark cool color because it is in the shadow. And we first have it at 100% to find the right color. Then we just back it off slightly just to let some of that detail come through. And it's a very effective way for darkening down elements such as this. Using the clone tool just to extend that trunk a little bit. Using lasso to clean up the edges. And now we're using the dodge tool just to darken the trunk as it comes and intersects the bushes. So we're trying to find a nice spot for this palm tree because we want to silhouette it against the bright spot of the mountain behind it. Now we're doing another gradient quick mask. Just darkening down a little bit there. Now we're going to go in here and we're going to quickly paint out Bethany here so we can just deal with the beach. Just using a small brush, just sampling right off the plate, just doing a very quick paint out. And now I'm going to clone some of this water texture. Now cloning, a lot of people think it's simple, and it is fairly simple, but the key is to just sample from many different areas so that you don't have very obvious repetitions. Now here's a nice little bit of bush detail, and the main reason I picked it is because it was isolated against the sky, which is a very nice thing for us. Now we're going to use the extract filter this time, just because it has a lot of little wispy edges, and we're going to use the software to extract it for us. And I thought this would be a nice little bit of detail, just to give some realism to this edge that we quickly just lassoed out. And so just a few little elements such as this will really help these things feel real. So now we're going into curves, just balancing it in there properly. Going to go into our color overlay, just add a bit of a nice dark color over it, just to help it sit in there. So now we're going back to our main mountain, and we're adding a new layer. This is going to be a paint layer. We're just going to start blocking in some of the areas that weren't covered with the photo, and just to start, just to help all this start to sit together. So we're just sampling right off of the painting. One of the great things about using photos is that you have a great palette already there for all the little minor details, and so that's what we'll do. We'll just continue to sample off it, and you can see I have the color dynamics and shape dynamics turned on, so you can see I just scribbled in that one area and I had all those beautiful little color variations. I just quickly used the lasso there just to garbage out that little bit of a blue matte line around there. But now we're going in, and you can see we're adjusting the spacing a little bit so that it's spaced out a little bit, so that you see a little bit of space between each little brush dot. And that helps to suggest a lot of little greenery. So we're just alternating back and forth between the greenish tones and the rocky tones, just trying to build up this form. And we're trying to follow the natural contours that are already there, but to finish it up based on our design. Adding some shadow rock color. So we're just adding some lighter highlighted parts of rock just so we can show how this goes from light to dark. So it's not just sort of a soft blend. I actually need to figure that out. Notice I'm sampling little bits of green just to have that nice little bit of color variation, just so that the eye dances around a little bit so it's not just so flat and boring. A little bit of deeper shadows just to help punch up some contrast, and I'm just putting that in selectively. I'm not overdoing it. So we're trying to figure out how to make these elements blend in one another, and I noticed that the rock in that center portion was much whiter than the more red, warmer tone of the rock on the left. So we just use curves to bring that together. We're also going to paint in a lot of rock as a kind of a transitional element so that you really won't be able to tell where one begins and the other ends. So you see we're just blocking in some rock just so that these elements flow naturally into one another. And it's really kind of helps to try to visualize these spaces in your head, just so that you know how to detail them properly.